Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in Richland County. Dr. John Boyle is accused of killing his wife Maureen and burying her body.
The 12-year-old son finally took the stand.
Boyle confidently told the jury it was his decision to testify against his father.
I heard a scream. I heard a thud. It was about this loud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
I decided at an early age that our trauma should not be what defines us. It's what we choose to do with it that does. I'm here to share my unique perspective on true crime, mental health, society, and popular culture, and always with a slight sense of humor. I'm Collier Landry, and welcome to my show.
Mover Nation, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Happy, what is it, Wednesday, July 3rd? Day before 4th of July, kids outside throwing firecrackers and sparklers. I can hear them. Marisol's downstairs whining. What are we going to do? What we're going to do is we're going to discuss the aftermath of the Karen Read trial, the Karen Read mistrial, the Karen Read retrial. What is it going to be? Who knows? What are we going to enter into in the coming weeks, the coming months? Oy vey, as we say on this channel. And I would like to know, first of all, from the audience, after nine and a half weeks, how many of you are missing our dear friend OnlyFan? And there is an OnlyFan emoji for those that subscribe. You can add your OnlyFan emoji. I want to know how many have missed OnlyFan the last couple of days. I know I am feeling a little bit of OnlyFan withdrawals. And not referring to the website, referring to our good friend OnlyFan, who kept us company during much of the last week for sure, as the jury was in deliberations. But the famous white fan in the courthouse there in Dedham, it became its own little local celebrity. Okay, so it has been you think back on this trial and. I think, obviously everyone who was a Karen Read supporter was very much feeling, wanted obviously a not guilty verdict. I think, obviously, as we're going to hear from, the O'Keefe family was looking for a different outcome. Obviously, the prosecution wanted a different outcome. But what does this really mean for everyone moving forward? And John O'Keefe's brother, Paul O'Keefe, spoke out today, and we're going to play a little bit of that as soon as I jump in here on the other computer. And we're going to, I'm here to offer, as I say, my unique perspective as not only the son of a perpetrator, but the son of a victim. And when I see these things come through, when people ask me about these types of things, this is always my opinion, right? And, I have said a lot. I've talked a lot about over the last several weeks, John O'Keefe getting lost in all of this and Karen Read sucking out the oxygen of the entire situation. Now, that Karen Read sucking the oxygen out of a situation when she's on trial, I don't know if anyone can blame her for that. And it is about defending your life, of course, right? That is something that is very important. So, but I think a lot of people felt that John O'Keefe was sort of a casualty in all of this. Obviously was a real life casualty, but just his memory, a lot of people not even referring to him as Officer John O'Keefe. They were referring to him as just John O'Keefe or the victim, and not really remembering the legacy, which he really, the O'Keefe family, I've had a really hard time with seeing a lot of real public hate. Oh, Melanie Little's here. What's going on? Melanie Little in the house. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the East Coast. She's up late with us. A lot of people have questioned, where John O'Keefe, him getting lost in all this, right? And so Paul O'Keefe speaks out about this, and it's very, as I said, it's very hard. It's very hard for the O'Keefe family. They've been attacked a lot, obviously on social media. I don't think that's right. I don't think you should be attacking a victim's family, no matter what they believe. And I feel there's a real part of humanity that when you look at their situation and the lack of answers and the lack of responsibility, accountability from law enforcement, the responsibility of a really solid prosecution of a case to get them justice, a proper investigation that could have gone on. It is, they did get lost in all of this. Paul O'Keefe is very opinionated on the fact that the defense did such a good job for Karen Reed, and as they should. That's why they're defense attorneys. Well, we're going to play a little bit of this segment of his interview. Again, I found it heartbreaking because this is a family, again, that has no answers and has had such tragedy. And, Melanie Little's on here. We talked about this in our interview. I discussed it with Mark Betterow. I think everybody who was, I think there's a misconception that everyone who on the side of Karen Reed was somehow against John O'Keefe. And that's just not true. They wanted to see justice, but sending an innocent person to prison does not bring justice to a fallen officer's memory. Rushing to judgment and putting someone in jail or making them the center of an investigation does not bring justice for John O'Keefe. So again, I think this is something to keep in mind because it's very, very, it's a real effect of this. And as you guys can hear, little Marisol is downstairs making a lot of noise. So I'm going to just play this little excerpt of this interview. And then I'm going to go downstairs and grab her because she's being bad. my little Chihuahua, as we like to refer to her, Queen Marisol. And but this is the interview that came out today with Paul O'Keefe.
My first question is obvious. Just how are you doing? How's your family doing?
I mean, we're doing all right, hanging in there. It's been a long, painful 2.5 years. And I mean, with the mistrial that happened the other day, obviously wasn't ideal, but if we have to do it again, we'll do it again. So we're ready to go.
Did you, prior to jury deliberations, ever think a mistrial was even possible?
I kept everything was on the table, I guess, but obviously hoping and confident that we were going to get the conviction that we were looking for. So as far as a mistrial, yes, it's something we didn't want, obviously, but it's just a bump in the road. And like I said, we'll do it again. We'll do it as many times as we have to. You'll
be back in court every day for another long trial.
Absolutely.
How are your parents?
They're doing all right. That's more of my concern, is that they have to go through this again. I mean, I'll do it 10 more times if I have to, but I hate the fact that they have to go through this all again.
Do a little.
We don't know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. But I mean, overall, they're doing okay.
So it's interesting, this interview. This interviewer, I would say, as she gets into this conversation with him, you can clearly see that she was on, I would say, the side of the prosecution. Not that there's sides, right? I think that the side should be on the side of justice and proper investigation. That's the thing that I think gets lost on all of this is, again, this, it's interesting because, and I did talk about this with Melanie Little, I was not really aware of the anti-Karen Reed sentiment. I mean, I assume there was a lot of it, but the sort of the bloodthirstiness and the myopic view of this is what happened and this is what we can't get over, when there's witnesses called in by both sides to be able to refute what the prosecution's case was, and to refute and to say, look, this evidence that has been proposed by the prosecution is not valid. And I understand that they want justice for John. It's just been very misguided, in my opinion. And
it seemed like, for a reason, very, very strong kids.
They're great kids.
Oh, he talks about this. So this is, again, also something that I know all too well. And he talks about their decision to allow the children to testify in the case, which apparently the daughter, who is now 16, was 14 at the time of the incident, really wanted to testify. And again, as I spoke with Melanie Little about this, but I also spoke many times about the desire of the children to do something for all intents and purposes, their father's memory, because you'll never get that opportunity again. But again, what they would face if they didn't do it, and recognizing that as a young person, and standing up and doing what you feel is right, I think was very crucial in this case. And I commend their courage, because it's very difficult to do that.
They have every excuse in the world not to be good kids. My niece Kaylee, super strong. When asked if she wanted to testify, we told them they didn't have to, and she said absolutely she wants to. She wanted her voice heard, her story heard. Wanted people to listen to her. She felt like because she was 14 at the time, that no one wanted to listen to her. So she was strong and insisted on doing it. And my nephew was, he wanted to support her, so he said if she does it, I'll do it. So I'm proud of them both for doing what they did.
Yeah, they're really strong when they got on the stand. It was amazing. Do you feel comfortable telling me, just from all that you've learned over the last 2.5 years, like what you think happened that night?
Oh, we know what happened. We know that Johnny and Karen were arguing. It was kind of towards the end of their relationship. Things weren't well. They were drinking and arguing and fighting, and in an intoxicated state of rage and jealousy, she just decided that she was going to do something about it, and put the car in reverse and ran him down and left him there to die. And we figured it out as soon as she left the house that day. When she came over, we didn't.
This is where I begin to sort of, all due respect to the family, they are grieving the loss of his brother, of a son, of a parent. And I understand what their perspective is, and I understand that they've latched onto this narrative, and I understand them questioning this conspiracy theory that came from the defense, which is what he's going to get into. Doesn't mean that what they believe happened either. If I've discussed this a lot on this program and a lot with my friends going over this case, and many people pointed out, yes, they may have been in a bad relationship and a toxic relationship. Karen may have, obviously she's listening to those voicemails in court. She's looking back on those text messages that are going back and forth. She's probably having a lot of remorse about what she said or did in terms of her engagement with John O'Keefe in the last moments of his life, or during the time or after he was passed. And I think that, everybody makes mistakes in relationships. It doesn't mean that she would drive her car into him and kill him. And especially when the evidence doesn't lead to that. That's the thing. So it's so hard to hear this, because he seems so convinced. And we'll listen to it more.
Didn't talk to any investigators, state police, nobody. My mother had said, do you think she has something to do with this? And I said, we're not going to think like that. Went outside to the driveway to look at her car, and her car was gone. It was a blizzard. I knew what the driving conditions were like coming from the hospital to Canton. And I knew that they were going back to Dighton, which was a much further drive. Mm-hmm. So we put it together pretty quickly.
I was going to ask you that next. So you took words out of my mouth. It was like, when did you realize? It was literally that morning.
Yeah. So I would say early afternoon when they came back to the house. She wanted to come over and see the kids. Didn't really interact with them at all. Was there for probably a total of 30 minutes. Didn't say much or anything. And half of her time was upstairs gathering her things. Then my wife spoke to her on the phone on their way back to Dighton. And she told my wife that just have to remember the bad times. And I don't think I'm ever going to talk to you guys again.
So that to me is the thing, that just have to remember the bad times. I don't think I'm going to talk to you guys, ever talk to you guys again. Is that because she realized that she is going to be the only suspect, and she realizes that their relationship is potentially over, or that she, or that she would probably not have anything to do with the family anymore? She needed to go off and grieve again. you have to think about this because, again, it was the state's case. It was the state's job to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Karen Reed was guilty. And she is presumed innocent, and there's a mistrial, and there will be the retrial. And this thing, it seems like there is no end in sight for it. However, again, the burden of proof lies on the prosecution. And I understand that they had certain feelings, but we all watched it play out in court. And I understand that Alan Jackson is a great attorney, that David Yannetti is a great attorney, that she had great counsel, that she hired people when her life was on the line to look out for her and her best interests, as we are all allowed to do in the United States in a court of law. That is what that is how our system works. So it's just very tough to listen to him, and I feel so bad for them.
Was that phone call what made you sure of what had happened?
Absolutely, yeah. We already, like I said, we put the pieces together on our own, and that just really solidified it. You know, why would somebody say that? Why would someone say, you know, if you didn't do anything, why would you say you're never going to talk to us again? Or why do you have to remember the bad times? Almost like justifying what she did.
Right. How would you have expected her to act in that situation if she hadn't done something?
More sad, empathetic, sympathetic. But like I said, when she was at the house, she barely said a word.
I have a hard time. And again, I realize the hypocrisy. I realize the potential hypocrisy of, I guess our Nightbot is not working. Sorry, Nightbot. I realize the potential hypocrisy of what I am saying to judging another person's grief. But he is saying, I would have thought that she would have behaved X, Y, and Z. Everybody grieves differently. And if she's also realizing at that point in time that she could be a suspect in this for whatever reason, but we all, you know, she was again questioning herself at the scene, right? In what I believe to be a trauma response type of scenario where she's trying to comprehend, here's somebody that despite their relationship, she loved, they were together a very long time, and how they can, Melanie Little, thank you so much for the super sticker. Look at Melanie Little. Thank you very much. And again, you know, how do you judge someone else's grief against yours? As I can remember going through this in my own life as a child. I remember people judging me for not grieving at all. I remember, and for me in my situation, I remember my mother saying to me years earlier, be strong, at a funeral for my grandmother, for my grandfather, to be a strong little boy. And I think people go back to those sort of scenarios where they get stoic and they want to protect themselves, right? They don't want to expose themselves, especially if she thinks she's going to be a suspect. The whole kerfuffle, the whole scuttlebutt of all this is no one knows what happened, and no one knows how to behave in a situation like this because you're so new to it. When you're thrown into a situation, you discover him on the lawn, you drive back, you're trying to figure out what could have happened to him. Of course, you're going to react how you're going to react. And I appreciate Paul O'Keefe's perspective, but again, how can you judge another person's grief at the same time? If she didn't feel that he didn't feel that she grieved enough or she was crying enough. Well, some people just shut down. That's just their mechanism. Shut down. Look, I'm a man. I've been in relationships where I've been accused of shutting down. I'll just shut down my emotions. Okay, you're right. Yep, you're right. We do that. Women do it too. We all have different ways that we react. And to judge her guilt or innocence just based on her reaction of just not even knowing, well, yep, I guess this is how it is. And look, we don't know the intricacies of their relationship. Paul doesn't even know the intricacies of their relationship. So how nobody has that specific lens on other than Karen Reed and John O'Keefe, who is deceased. So, yeah.
You know, she wanted to be there for the kids. My nephew came home. My niece was already home by the time she got there.
Yeah, I agree.
Family arrived.
Melanie.
And I sat down, my nephew in the other room, she sat right next to him. I explained to him that JJ's, something happened and he's no longer with us. She didn't say a word. And right after that, she went upstairs and started gathering her belongings. And the next thing you know, they were gone.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's hard. It's a strange behavior.
Very strange.
I mean,
when did the whole narrative of her version of events become known to you?
Again, how is it strange behavior? Everyone's behavior is different. She's reacting to something that is very horrific and very tragic. How is she supposed to react?
Well, if you remember her first arraignment in Stoughton District Court, her attorney.
It reminds me of I interviewed Elizabeth Stout, who was a survivor of the mass casualty event, because we have to use the YouTube language, mass casualty event at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Parkland, Florida. And there's a lot of talk around pundits and between pundits that they were crisis actors. They weren't behaving the right way. There wasn't this reaction, this Monday morning quarterback sort of way about how people are supposed to behave in a tragedy. And it's, again, everyone reacts differently. And I look at this interviewer and just like, oh, well, yeah, that's just, that's very telling. Come on, man. Come on.
David Unetti had said this is a tragic accident. His client had no criminal intent. Mm-hmm. And then, fast forward to, I guess, when Alan Jackson came on board, and, they teamed up with a blogger to get their story that they concocted and put together and flooded out there. And people were only hearing one side of the story and coming to conclusions before actual evidence in the trial had actually begun. So a lot of the public was misinformed, because they were only getting one side of the story. And, we didn't come out and tell our side of the story or, what we thought or knew happened.
But here's the thing. Again, I realize a little bit of the hypocrisy about me also talking about his reaction. We all saw the evidence. We all listened to it in the courtroom. And in no way, shape, or form, in my opinion, and again, I'm not, as I say all the time, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a psychologist, and I do not work in law enforcement. I'm just a guy who's been through a lot of shit. But if you watch everything play out it is just so difficult to come to any sort of rational conclusion that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her car and then left him to die in the cold, which is the whole case of the whole case the prosecution presented. And yes, you are allowed to hire lawyers. And yes, I understand that social media and that people who have other interests, whether their own personal quest for fame or YouTubers like myself talking and weighing in as pundits on this case, maybe furthered or distracted from theories. But at the end of the day, all of that outside noise is shut down inside the courtroom, because the jury is not supposed to look into any of this outside of the courtroom. And they are only physically looking at the evidence right in front of us. I said the other day, I almost would, not that I have the time to do this, but I almost want to go back and watch the trial and not think about anything that I knew, but just listen to all the evidence and how could you come to a conclusion? How could you come to, honestly, how'd you come? Oh, look, my hair is really curly tonight. How could you come to any conclusion, let alone a conclusion where she backed her vehicle into him and caused his death? And something that we've talked about is the fact that the case took 9 weeks to go through, 9.5, 10 weeks, what have you, and then years of pretrial motions and et cetera, et cetera. Everything being so convoluted in the eyes of the jury. I think that a lot of them were just confused. You're confused at the end of the day. I would be, especially when we find out that they can't get what is called readback. Correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie. If you're still here, I think you said it was readback. How you have this, making sure I'm not on mute, by the way. I got two computers going now. So this one here. Okay. And the jurors are relying on their memory and their personal notes that they took during, their chicken scratch that they take during the trial. And that's what they get to refer back to when they're in deliberations. And again, you think about how confusing that is. We can sit here, we have the luxury of looking and watching videos and reading newspaper articles and interacting with one another, watching news programs and saying, oh, okay, this is what we heard. This is what we compare. They don't have that luxury. They're going on what they can remember, what they saw, and what they made notes on. And that's it. And, it's interesting. I know that I believe one of the alternates spoke out, or one of the jurors spoke out. I mean, this is like a content creator's dream to be able to have all this stuff to work with. But again, I'm very curious as to what their process was in the courtroom, because I don't envy them at all. And again, Paul O'Keefe just trying to make sense of this, but if you are a defendant in the United States, you are allowed to use all of your resources to defend yourself. That is what the law provides all of us. It would provide the O'Keefes the same thing. They would be afforded those same rights under our Constitution. And, so
we've kept a low profile.
To the victor come the spoils.
Been silent through this whole ordeal. But, now it's time. Now it's time for people to understand the truth. And the jurors, we thank them. They did a great job. They put in a lot of hours, paid a lot of attention, worked hard.
And what is that truth? That's the thing that I have the hardest time understanding too, is what is this notion of the truth that he alludes to? Are we, I don't know what he's thinking. And again, he's grieving. And they've been dealing with this for 2.5 years. Again, I have obviously massive compassion and sympathy for the O'Keefe family. However, I also have, and I don't want to see them be attacked on social media. He gets into that a little bit. We won't get into that because we all know what happens with this and the vitriol that's been online on both sides going at it. But you think about, again, the facts. And again, I understand you want justice, but justice is not sending an innocent person to prison. It's just not. It's just not, because you'll never get that satisfaction. And then if, Kyron Reed does go to prison, and then something comes out that all of this other craziness happened, these investigations start to unpack all of this other malfeasance that occurred, whether it be from Trooper Proctor or the other characters, the McCabes, the Alberts, what have you. If all of this comes to light, then you sit back and you go, oh, well, we put an innocent person in prison. Again, reasonable doubt. A jury could not find her guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And half of them didn't think that she was innocent either, or that she was not guilty. So everybody was just confused. And I understand where he's coming from, but we all saw the evidence and that closure, and what is that going to look like for this family? Because I don't even know what's going to happen from here on out.
Unfortunately, they weren't able to come to, a consensus as far as a verdict goes, but, we have another chance at it. And, hopefully the jury that we get for the second time around will see things more clearly.
So just so I'm clear, you think this all started when Alan Jackson showed up, and Karen, throughout the course of this trial, you think she knows what she did?
She knows exactly what she did. And she's trying to buy and lie her way out of this, refusing to take accountability for her actions. Not only that, but pointing the finger and blaming innocent people.
Yeah, talk to me about that. I mean, because the thing is, the story on the defensive side is not just, oh, she didn't do it. It's she didn't do it and all these other people did.
Yeah, I mean, she's pointing the finger at everybody. Everyone's lying except for her, according to her. I think we had 67 witnesses testify.
68.
I'm sorry, testify.
Right.
There's a lot of people.
And according to them, they're all lying and they're not credible. And, which, I mean, there's first responders that were just doing their job that day.
Again, and I don't mean to laugh. I don't mean to be. Again, this is a brother that's grieving. But Karen Reed is afforded every constitutional right to defend herself. And I don't think anyone who was in her position would have done anything differently. You can hire a high-powered lawyer. Absolutely. You see that social media, which is obviously, I understand, is a very new phenomenon, and our legislatures, our United States Congress is catching up to the impacts of this. Our society is. It's so new. The proliferation of social media has created a whole other animal that exists around these types of cases. I can't even imagine what's going on. What's going to happen in the Koberger trial. Have you guys watched, by the way, total side note, Harvey Levin from TMZ has a new show that's coming out. My friend is on it. Or a couple of my friends are on it actually, but he's talking about the Koberger case, and I can't even imagine what a nightmare that's going to be. I mean, this is the conjecture that I've heard from that is just is next level compared to this. But again, if I'm a defendant, if Paul was a criminal defendant, if his brother was, if the tables were turned, he would want to use every resource that's available to him. And we saw a lot with it. Again, I was so young when O.J. Simpson was a thing, but the O.J. trial, it's the court of public opinion, right? But again, that does not matter in the courtroom, because the courtroom is, if our judicial system works the way it's supposed to, is the jury is not allowed to review any of these materials. It's supposed to make their mind up independently from any outside influence. And whether they adhere to that or not, I mean, I don't know how you do that in this day and age anyways. You pick up the phone and the phone knows exactly where you're at. It's going to give you the current headlines, but that's not my thing. So again, I understand it's probably very difficult, but and maybe that could permeate into a jury pool. Who knows? But it's not supposed to. It's not the way the justice system works. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but that's not the way the justice system is supposed to work. They are specifically looking at the evidence, and they couldn't come to a conclusion based upon the facts that were presented and on both sides, and based upon the evidence that was presented on both sides, and listening to all 68, as he said, of these witnesses that testified at this trial, and they could not come to an agreement on whether Karen Reed was guilty or not guilty. And again, we were all watching it. And there was a lot of conflicting stories and a lot of experts that were brought in to refute conflicting stories. And you think about Vinnie Politan was talking on his show, and I want to play a little excerpt of it because he had some great experts. I wish I had access to these people right here. I could be like, come on my show, let's talk about this. They were talking about even the prosecutions, again, because these mystery cell phones, Brian Higgins getting rid of his cell phone, the butt dials, the this, that, and the other. And I know I'm not here to relitigate all this, but it is interesting because that cell phone data wasn't seized. The whereabouts of everyone who was on that night, their positioning, were they in the house, where John was, where they were in relation to John, none of that was brought out. And a lot of people are saying that was an oversight by the prosecution for maybe not bringing that evidence in to try to establish, to refute this case of, if here's the Albert's phone in the house. But again, it appears to be that 2 of those cell phones were destroyed. So you can't get that accurate data. You can't get that Apple Watch data like they had, or Apple Health data that they had for John O'Keefe. You can't get those certain things. As far as I know, Karen Reed handed her cell phone over. And a lot of people talk about, she deleted messages and she did this and this. Well, yes. And we saw how everyone who deleted messages, the messages were still exposed. So if anyone can take anything away from this trial, I think it should be 2 things. One is, it's 4th of July tomorrow. I'm somebody who hasn't drank in 4 years. Get a handle on your alcohol. You don't want to be in this situation. That's the number one thing. Second thing is, realize that that everything you put out in the internet is forever. It doesn't matter. You type it in the phone, they're going to find it. Hawes Long, dying cold, this, that, deleting. Just because you delete a text message doesn't mean. Anybody who's been in a court case knows was in a court case last year, and they pulled up all my text, which I gave them anyways. It's like they had my text messages because they can pull them, but I was like, I don't care. Here's my phone. To the the plaintiffs, like, hey, or to the defendants, here you go, take my phone. But they pull out everything, and sometimes you go, oh, I can't believe I said that. That was cringy. Oh, I can't believe I said that. But this is the day and age we live in. Stay off the phone, as Robert De Niro most famously says in Goodfellas. Stay off the effing phone. To Ray Liotta's character, R.I.P. Again, I understand the anger. I understand that, but I feel it's very misdirected because they sat in the trial every day. How could he even say to himself, "Oh yeah, I heard this," and I was without a doubt he hit her. I think they were also very laser focused on Karen, and as he said in the beginning, they were questioning her behavior and her taking her stuff out of the house and her saying, "I don't want to, I guess we're not going to talk to one another ever again." And I mean, this is her boyfriend's family, and he's dead. So were they all best friends? Not as far as I knew. So maybe she's like, it's done. He's gone, and I'm out of here. I'm going to move on with my life, or I'm going to go on trial, or what have you. Can't judge all that.
Jen McCabe, Kerry Roberts.
Oh,
all they did was pick up the phone and help because she was asking for help. And according to them, the only one telling the truth is her.
Right. So,
the only one, according to her defense counsel, yes, she is the only one telling the truth because she is on trial. And that's what they are supposed to do. They are supposed to create this reasonable doubt. You can't get upset with, I understand why he's upset, because he believes that Karen Read took the life of his brother. But you can't be upset for her getting a good defense, because all of us would want to have the defense for ourselves.
I don't even know what to call them. We have a variety of names. The pink people.
And these wires. Can you guys clean up
They turned on all those people first.
Please. Clean up these wires on the deck.
But then how have they treated you guys over the course of the last year and a half?
Well, if you just go back to...
Sorry, I'll rewind this. I was talking.
Not McCabe. But then how have they treated you guys over the course of the last year and a half?
Now, this is what he says breaks my heart, because the victim's family should never be excoriated, chastised, admonished for anything. There are people who, and I know who they are, and they've said very vulgar things about this family, and I do not think it's right. And you can't go after a victim's family. I'm sorry, you can't. It's blame the victim, even if you don't like them. You know what I mean? It's sort of an unwritten rule.
Well, if you just go back to any video of us walking into court during pretrial hearings, yelling, screaming, calling us names.
By the way, I can relate to this because I was way back when I testified at my father's trial. I had a lot of rumors circulating around me, and then growing up later and having to deal with everything. And, I was coached, I was manipulated. He's a POS. He's a mama's boy. He's this. He's making it all up, which was also rumors that were stirred up by my father while he was incarcerated and trying to get an appeal. So, yeah, they came after me too. I know what that's like. It is not fun to hear that stuff.
To this day, I don't know what I did wrong. I get messages all the time, whether through Facebook or other ways of communication, telling me that I'm a moron, I'm stupid, need to open my eyes and all this stuff. But I ignore those. I don't really care what people say to me, because this isn't about me. This is about my brother. And I like to think I know a little bit more of what's going on in the case than, people that are just reading stuff on the internet.
Very familiar with Brene Brown. Wish my TED Talk had as many views as Brene Brown's. Yes. And you're talking about shame and living with shame. She has a great TED Talk. If you guys, it's probably like 50 million views by now. Best-selling author, Brene Brown. Very, very good TEDx talk that she did in TEDx Austin or something. I think it was in Texas or Houston or something. This is a gajillion years ago, like 13 years ago or something, or 10 years ago. It's a fantastic TED Talk. Check it out. It's here on YouTube or on the TEDx, the TED website. Brene Brown talks about shame and living with shame. It's great. To answer your question, I'm very familiar with Brene Brown. She's great. again, I feel bad. And I was trying to explain this. I was trying to explain this case to a friend of mine the other day who is female and does not like true crime. I don't know how that's even a thing, but she's like, I don't care. But then she's like, everybody's talking. She lives here in LA, and she's like, Collier, everybody's talking. You're talking about it, but now my neighbors are talking about this Kerry retrial, because it seemed like in the last week. And there's people who've been commenting on the YouTube videos. They come on, they're like, I just discovered this when it was a mistrial, or I just discovered it at the end of last week. They all come on, and they've been playing catch up. Like, oh, all of a sudden we've discovered this trial has been going on for this whole thing's been going on for 2.5 years, and we've discovered it in the last week. But she said to me, talk to me a little bit about why this is such a big deal and the people who are involved. And I said, one of the things is exactly what Paul O'Keefe is talking about, which is this public,
and there's been things said about me, accusations about me, all types of things that just aren't true. But again, I just brush it off because this isn't about me.
So if these people buy into this big conspiracy, right, that
we'll get into that in a second. What he's saying about the Facebook messages that he encounters, I kind of talked over it. So
because this isn't about me. This is about my brother. And I like to think I know a little bit more of what's going on in the case than, people that are just reading stuff on the internet.
Sure.
And there's been things said about me, accusations about me, all types of things that just aren't true. But again, I just brush it off because this isn't about me.
So I'm explaining to this young woman, I said, one of my things with true crime in general, and there was a series made last year with last year, 2023, end of 2022, beginning of 2023, end of 2022. Dahmer, Ryan Murphy created the series. Evan Peters, I believe, won a Golden Globe for playing Jeffrey Dahmer, and I interviewed the sister of Earl Lindsay. I interviewed her on another podcast. I interviewed her in a Vice documentary that I did. And I was talking about the very real effects of this type of access. And again, it breaks my heart to hear that he's been attacked online, because it happens. But again, with the proliferation of social media, it is very easy for people to go on and type whoever it is that they're looking at, or whatever they are into, as far as the case that they're following, or they're watching the documentary or the docu-series or the scripted television series that it's based upon, and find the characters. And I was, and I don't know why. Oh, Rita Isbell. So Rita Isbell was the sister of Earl Lindsay, which was one of the Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, and I believe his second to last victim, if I'm not mistaken. And Rita was portrayed by an actress in this series, and it went out on a TikTok video, and it was a side-by-side video of Rita in real life, this little black woman being held back by sheriff's deputies and lawyers, and in the courtroom, because she was giving her victim impact statement, and she lost it, and she tried to basically rip Jeffrey Dahmer's head off in the courtroom. And they're just holding her back, and this actress did a mirror image portrayal of her. And Rita found out about this because she started getting messages that were sent to her of the most vulgar kind, most of them having a racist connotation, most of them having just pure venom and vitriol towards her. And her brother's life was taken by Jeffrey Dahmer. And she stood in court, and she had no idea that this series was even being made. She was living her life in Milwaukee, just going about her life, and then all of a sudden goes on social media one day and sees that she's a meme or a viral TikTok video, and then all this vitriol comes into her inbox. And that is absolutely one of the things that is an unfortunate casualty of war, for lack of a better word, is this ability for people to just reach right through the screen and just dig into people. And one of the things that I saw, and I'm going to be interviewing the gentleman from LTL Media, who I was looking through his stuff, and he had all these videos of outside the courthouse during Karen Reed coming up, and I was watching it, just going, First of all, I was looking at all the old cute puritanical looking buildings from way back in the day, but also just the presence outside the courthouse of obviously mostly Karen Reed supporters. And there was this woman, and she was, I guess, these people every morning read a list of rules to the people who were standing outside of the courthouse. And I thought to myself, wow, that's really cool that they are trying to establish some sense of decorum so it doesn't get out of hand, so people don't get arrested for some stupid shit, so people just don't say things, you're going to say things you regret. And I tell the story about Rita Isabel because sometimes the architecture in Dedham is adorable. Violet Lotus, yes. If you say things, you're going to regret them, right? And I think back to Rita facing this venom and this vitriol just from having someone who was murdered by a serial killer. And because somebody made a television show about it, it all of a sudden made her fair game for, very inappropriate comments of all kinds. And it really affected her. And I think that's also another takeaway from this trial, is that we can think about what we say, how we approach victims, how we approach the families, who we choose to, it's very polarizing. Everybody wants to take a side. Everybody wants to be the cool kid sometimes and jump on the bandwagon, whether it be to pro Karen Reed or anti Karen Reed, what have you. But again, taking it down a couple of notches and thinking about that these are people dealing with real life stuff. And even as Paul O'Keefe is still grieving his brother and obviously believes Karen Reed is guilty, but that's his natural process. We have to respect that too. We might not understand it, but we have to respect that he is going through that process. And maybe one day he'll say, look, Lori Daybell. Yes. Catherine Billinghurst, Lori Daybell, Lori Vallow, however, Lori Vallow Daybell. Yeah. Lori Vallow, again, you look at that case, right? And that was something that, that her son, I was thinking a lot about him, his process, right? And, if you watch that documentary, which is called Sins of Our Mother, oh my God, her taking him to college in the car. And then his mom commits this heinous act with Chad Daybell, who's obviously appropriately been sentenced to death. One of the things that I had issues with this trial too, with the conjecture on the other side of everything, was the fact that I think back to Buster Murdaugh and the Murdaugh trial and the charges of him being involved in the murder of Stephen Smith, and that whole situation and just how that took on a life of its own during the trial itself. And he has obviously rightfully, justly sued for libel and defamation against the media outlets that promulgated that theory. But yeah, it gets out of hand. So back to what I was saying, when I saw the woman in front of the Karen Reed supporters in front of the courthouse and said, like, let's follow some rules here, guys. Let's have a sense of decorum. I felt good about that. Because, again, you don't want to, there shouldn't be unnecessary casualties in all this.
People buy into this big conspiracy, right? That Brian Albert's a murderer or whoever. Okay. If they buy into that, why are they turning on you guys? Has that ever made sense to you?
Because we don't believe in a crazy conspiracy theory that holds no merit, no evidence. I mean, we know these people. I mean, Jen McCabe has been a family friend of ours. She was friends with my sister. We've known her for over 10 years. She was very helpful with, picking Kaylee up to and fro when he took over raising the kids. Kerry Roberts, we've known for a very, very long time, right? And at the time, she didn't really know Jen McCabe or any of the McCabes or Alberts. And her testimony corroborated everything that Jen said. And the defense, I think, was scared of her and didn't even want to ask her any questions. They just wanted her off the stand. I guess the negative or hate that's directed towards me, mostly me and my mother, is.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's, as I said, that's out of line to go after them. Again, they're innocent people in all of this, and I feel for him.
People who are being falsely accused of something they didn't do, right? And their lives have been turned upside down and partially ruined. You know, Colin Albert, who was a 17-year-old kid at the time, his life has been turned upside down and ruined. I've gotten to know the Alberts through all this, and they're all good people.
And again, I can't speak to any of this. I don't know these people at all. This is his opinion. And I would agree with one thing. Everyone's life has been turned upside down. Everyone, from Karen Reed to the O'Keefes to the Alberts to the McCabes. Everyone knows these people. Nobody knew any of these people 2.5 years ago and plus 1 month. In December, in beginning of January 2022, nobody knew who these people were. And it is just snowballed, and everyone's life gets turned upside down. And I think if you take away anything from this channel or the content that I do, I understand the very realistic, the very real world impacts of all of this and how it affects. It's why I made a documentary. It's why I talked about the consequences of violence. It's why I talk about true crime. It's why I give my perspective on it, because there are very real world impacts to all of this. That I said it every day we were watching. If you were watching on my live stream, if you were one of the 100, 200 people that were watching the live stream with us, I would say every time at the end of every show, look, we have the luxury of watching this, giving our opinion, going back and forth in the comments, and then walking away, because it doesn't carry over into our day-to-day life. We do not have to go home and try to reconcile with this, that we've lost a friend, a loved one. We have the luxury to walk away. These people don't. And this is going to affect their lives, the rest of their lives. And the O'Keefes still don't have justice. And Karen Reed is still not really a free person in a lot of ways, because she's still living under, Mark Bedrow said it best with Melanie Little, she is still living under the same conditions that she was. She's going to live under this for the next 6 to 9 months that she's already been living under, which is as a suspect. And she could go to trial because the state is claiming they are going to retry this case. So while she gets to, fight another day, live another day, and have another day of freedom, she also has the anvil hanging over her head that she could go be dragged back into court. And what does that case even look like? And, there are some other channels that have talked about the fact that there could be more of an investigation into any of this, which would be great, because again, you have a family that doesn't have justice. But again, that justice doesn't look like putting an innocent person in prison. That doesn't do anyone any favors, and it certainly doesn't do anything for a guilty conscience. My thoughts and prayers go out to the O'Keefe family, because they've had a hard row to hoe, and this is not. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. I know a lot what this feels like, for sure. It really stings. And again, always lead with compassion, guys. That's what I always say. You will never regret being nice and kind to people. Never. You will never regret. Even if you're nice to the wrong people, you'll be like, I wasn't an a-hole. I don't care. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to lead with. Yeah, I understand. This is a man who's grieving, and I understand it. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think one of the things that we can all hopefully take away from this is that they deserve justice. And we'll see what happens with this FBI thing and all this internal affairs investigation. I want to play this other video that Politan brought on his show. A bunch of these experts, and these guys were great. Let's see here. Yeah, okay. Let's see, is this the right one? Yeah, okay, great. All right, this was, let me go Oh, I gotta share it. Sorry, guys. I gotta share the screen. Hello. Again, 2 computers, it gets tricky. Streaming computer and regular computer. Editing computer. Collier and medical. Collier medical. Collier and Melanie. I need y'all to check out the December 26, 2018 Canton, Mass car crash where the cops didn't investigate, cleared scene, and left a dead body for 2 hours that neighbors discovered. Well, that's interesting. We'll just screenshot. Oh, nope, wrong thing. We'll just screenshot that. Court McNeil's in the comments. Maybe Court McNeil can make note of that. Let's check that out too. It seems like this little town of Canton is very interesting. It reminds me of my little town of Mansfield a little bit. Not that there's a lot of corruption in small towns. What can I say? So Vinnie Politan talks to, this is they get into the iPhones, they get into some of the evidence. All right, let's just play this.
To track her whereabouts. So we're able to follow and figure out where she is and when she's there.
His audio is so good all the time.
Data from her car backing up. All this stuff was used to tell this jury, not through some witness who said, yeah, I saw her at this time, but data that says she is somewhere at some time. Well, what about the rest of the people in the house?
There you go. There you go.
There's a bunch of them. They all testified. But at the end of the day, their testimony wasn't enough. Either the cross-examination or the direct wasn't enough to convince the jury one way or the other, collectively. So isn't there some way that someone could help us track where all these people were and what they were doing,
which is
in the hours in question? Well, let's find out.
Joining
me tonight,
experts.
He's the best criminal defense investigator, Charles Middlestad, with us.
Also
joining us, the former head of the homicide unit in the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, attorney Rick Grundy, and finally, criminal defense attorney, college instructor, author, Peter Ellikin. Great to have all three of you tonight, handpicked by me to be in this segment tonight. Charles, you know something about phone data. You know a lot. You're able to put people together. Don't need to get into all that, but let me ask you, Charles, if you've got all these people in the house, most people have phones, as we sit here tonight getting ready for a new trial, is it possible, like logistically, I'm not gonna get into the legal wrangling yet, but logistically to find records from cell phone towers or somewhere else where you can help track the location of the other people who were in the house that night?
There certainly is, Vinny, and again, I didn't follow this case gavel to gavel, so I don't know the full scope of the testimony or the evidence in the case. But certainly, what was available to both sides was simply with a subpoena was the ability to subpoena every single individual's phone records, the call detail records, and also the geolocation data associated with those phones. And that's done simply with a subpoena to a cell phone provider. It's very easy to determine the carrier for each individual subscriber that we're dealing with. And it looks like we're dealing with about 10 different individuals. And certainly the defense would have had access to that. They would have had the ability through their discovery powers to leverage that data. Now, as to whether those records would exist anymore or not, really depends on the carrier. Each carrier has a different policy with regard to preservation. And so some of those records may still exist, some of them may not. But what you would be able to do, in addition to the geolocation data, and frankly, more important, I think, at this stage than the geolocation data associated with those individuals within the household is the call detail records. Because if something happened inside of that house, I suspect that there would have been a flurry of activity on those phones. You would see text messages, you wouldn't see the content because the content's not going to be within those call detail records. The content would reside on those phones, and you would actually need to have physical custody of those phones in order to image them.
Well, some of those phones have been destroyed, so they wouldn't necessarily be available. So some of let me ask you this. Let me follow up on something else. Is there any other way to track locations of cell phones in an area? Can you get data straight from cell phone tower records? Is there anything like that exist, or is that the geo-fed stuff?
That's the geolocation. So again, when you're subpoenaing the call detail records, within that is the geolocation data. And so you have, it's broken into two categories. You have the cell tower data that you're referring to, Vinny. And then in addition to that, you have historical GPS data. And there's a third segment, which is the engineering data, which often I just subpoenaed some AT&T records. And so I not only got what's called NELOS data, that's AT&T's proprietary historical GPS data. which is far, far more precise than cell tower data. Cell tower data, you get into propagation studies in terms of range and so forth. GPS can be accurate within 3 meters.
Just to comment on your comment, Emily, God, that looks like my friend just got a dog. It looks just like my friend's dog that she just got. I don't know what it is, like a multi-poo or something. Emily, what about the way Karen and Karen Reed supporters have been treated? It goes both ways. Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was interviewing Melanie Little, she brought up to my attention, which is something I had no idea. People were commenting on Karen Reed's guilt based upon her outfits that she wore to court. Her outfits that she wore to court, the look on her face while she was in court, that all was a telltale sign of her guilt or innocence. That is the most ridiculous nonsense I have ever heard. The camera, every time it could, when a witness wasn't talking, it went on Karen Reed. Can you imagine being on camera every day for 9 weeks and pulling a daft face? I pull a daft face on here half the time. And I look back on playback, and I'm like, oh, man, you look like such an idiot, Collier. What are you doing? You imagine being under that kind of microscope? Come on. It's that was one of the things Paul O'Keefe talked about, was also the courtroom and the whole thing, and that her defense selected it. Well, yeah, of course. Again, she's not defending herself against a traffic ticket. You know, she didn't run a stop sign. She's accused of second-degree murder. Again, you should be able to have every resource available to you to defend yourself and to prove, to create reasonable doubt. Can't blame her attorneys. I'm sorry. You can't blame Karen Reed for hiring people, those people who are pissed. You know, you're pointing the finger in the wrong direction, in my opinion. Prosecution should have had a stronger case. It may have been a different outcome.
Not always, but it's far, far more accurate. It's not depending upon a tower. And then you also have this engineering data, which is also generally GPS based, which is also incredibly accurate.
I find this fascinating.
And so between those things, it is very possible to very precisely place somebody there. Now, with all those phones, whether they, again, a lot of these phones don't exist, but at the time, certainly the prosecution, had they gone in there, had they actually done proper interviews, had they actually taken some of these phones into custody, or at least sought permission to look at them or questioned these individuals about whether anybody had taken pictures, shot some video, you know, we often do witness.
This is what he says right now is great. He talks about, again, because these are law enforcement professionals like myself, what he talks about with observing what could have been on the phones, which were miraculously disappeared, about potential witnesses that could have been there. And again, they'll get into also the ring cameras in the neighborhood too, because I was somebody that said, well, why don't they have any ring cameras? And then apparently everybody's ring camera in the neighborhood didn't work that night. Snowplow driver didn't see anything, but then sees a Ford Edge outside, you know, at 3:30 in the morning that is moved into the area where John O'Keefe's body was found, and he testifies against it. And again, people went after the snowplow driver. Oh, he's this, that. Come on, guys. Get real. What is his incentive to lie? Come on. It's ridiculous.
This mining based upon getting a picture. We talked to a witness. Hey, did you take any pictures that night? Yeah, I think I did. And then we get a photograph, and in the background, we're able to identify 3 or 4 of the people in the background. So there's more witnesses. And now we identified. Now we're broadening the scope of the witness pool.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, though. Bottom line, with just tracking the location of everyone, whether they're moving in and out of the house, whether they're in the front yard, when they leave, can you do it without the phones? If the phones are gone, you can do it without the phones.
Well,
it's so much better on 1.5 speed, isn't it, guys?
You can place them in the general location. If you're relying on cell tower data, then you're going to be relegated to placing them in the general location of that residence.
Okay, but that may be enough in some of these instances. Rick Grundy, we sat through this whole trial. It's very unclear about any movements of any of these people. It's unclear exactly what time they show up, when they leave. Is it incumbent upon the prosecution at this point to attempt to bring that evidence in? Because from his perspective, he wants to erase that reasonable doubt that was being raised and obviously was raised during the course of this first trial. Do you see this as an option in the second trial?
I can't believe you say this first trial and a second trial. Can this community really go? I'm sure there are people who live in Canton that are on this chat. Can this community really go through a trial like this again?
could stop him. Why wouldn't a prosecutor want to uncover as much truth as possible, which could, from his perspective, erase reasonable doubt of this so-called conspiracy?
What do I sound like at 1.5 speed then? Because I already speak fast. I can't imagine how I must sound. I might sound like a chipmunk.
Hey guys, how are you? Welcome, Move Nation. Today we're going to talk about the 10 McCabe. Today we're talking about Kerry Reed.
That's what I imagine it sounds like. Yes, guys, it's a talent. This is not always a serious show, even though we talk about serious stuff. We will get Karen through it.
So I agree with the overall premise. More information is always better from the prosecution side because, I always tell young prosecutors the best thing you got going for you is that your job is to present the truth, find the truth and present it. So more information is always better. But beyond that, I think one thing that the prosecution erred in doing in the case was chasing down little landmines that were placed by the defense that we found out they couldn't follow up on what they said the jury was going to get to. Too much of the trial was spent on that. So I think, with respect to those individuals in the house, they all testified they were in the house. I'll defer to Charles, but my understanding of what's available at this point in time is not going to, if you could get Higgins and Albert and the young kid in the basement, alone, that would be great for the defense. But they're all in the house. You're not likely to get anything more precise that's going to swing the pendulum one way.
But let me tell you this: if they still have their phones, and they have Apple phones, and they have Apple Health, and they're not walking up and down the stairs, and you can show their movements, you can show when they left. Why wouldn't the prosecution want that? Why wouldn't the prosecution get it and try to present it? He knows that he didn't succeed first time around. I mean, something's got to change.
Also, why didn't they do this in the trial to begin with? If you already knew from the outset, from opening arguments, that this is going to be the case, and long before opening arguments, because Jackson has been talking about this, I believe, for a year, you already knew what their case was going to be. Why wouldn't you have all these records to disprove this? Because you don't have them, and you didn't have a case that was winnable in the first place, maybe. I'm not saying that that's the case, but perhaps that was their thought process. Might as well not drag anyone into this because we're probably not going to win anyways. I don't know. I'm not, as I say, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not in law enforcement. Just a guy who's been through a lot of shit. But to me, yes. And I will say this for the record. If y'all stick around for Christmas, I will do the Chipmunk Christmas song. It is a talent of mine. Lisa MM, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate it. Thank you all for the super stickers. Melanie Little kicked us off right with the $10 super sticker. It was very kind of her, or super chat. I can't remember which one it is. But yes, I have many hidden talents. Yes, please note, says Nightbot. Okay, back to the crew here with Vinny Politics.
We know the public reaction to the evidence in this case. Something's got to change if the prosecution believes they're in the right here and they want to win.
I like the idea that Charles put forth with respect to, there's going to be scampering. I mean, if there's nobody leaving the house by the side door or the storm door or whatever it was that supposedly dragged this body out, obviously that's great for you. But again, you're disproving, which is important, but I'd want him to focus on proving. And to be honest with you, I don't know that information wasn't available as much as it wasn't presented in the strongest manner and in a most effective manner. If John O'Keefe never gets, that's where I would want to focus. If John O'Keefe never gets into the house, game over on the defense theory. That's it. It's done. He never approached that threshold. It just didn't happen.
Let me ask you, Peter Elkin, for the defense, legally trying to get some more of this information. This defense is different. They are not saying that they can't prove it. They're saying they run the courthouse steps saying she's innocent. She's absolutely innocent, and someone else did it, and we know who did it. Like, at this point, getting ready for a second trial, you just sitting back and just letting it roll, or are you going to be aggressive in perhaps trying to reinvestigate the case and try to get more information because you believe that your client is factually innocent? They've been using those words, factually innocent. So do you think they need to be a little more proactive so they can show this jury why you can't?
That's a good point. That's what I came to understand as well. Again, it was a very strange trial. Very convoluted. I don't know.
Can't believe this prosecution theory.
Yeah, that's exactly what they should be doing. But here I'm going to play a little bit of a Mr. Negativity here. About, a little pessimistic about whether that information is available anymore. As we know, the phones of the people in the house, virtually every single one of them either deleted their phone or took their phone and threw out and destroyed the SIM card. So saying we'd like to go back, boy, that information would sure be valuable for us. That would that just the parade may have gone by. That may not exist anymore.
By the way, the fact is also you've got as we see Karen Reed marching in very high speed, she's because it's going 1.5 times speed. Look at the.
I know Charles has mentioned something about it'd be great to see. The parade we'd like to go back. Boy, that information would sure be valuable for us. That would that just the parade may have gone by. That may not exist anymore. I know Charles had mentioned something about it'd be great to see even the phone communications or when they.
Okay, let me cut you off because I think there's one moment here that is significant. Okay, this is a significant part of the case. The plow driver who testified. Let's take a listen so I can remind everyone what we're talking about here.
What time was it, your best estimate, in terms of when you would have approached Fairview and Cedar Crest again?
3:15 to 3:30. At that point, I saw a Ford Edge on the side of the road.
Where was it parked on the side of the road?
In front of the Albert's house.
Where in front of the Albert's house?
By the flagpole.
All right, Charles, I'm going to go back to you. If it's 3:15, everybody supposedly left the party, but now someone's pulling up in a Ford Edge or parking a Ford Edge near where the body was ultimately found. How would you go about trying to figure out?
That's a little shady, little suspect, right?
Someone is milling around at 3:15 at this point, not the initial investigation, but right now.
Again, the cell phone records. The cell phone records are completely different than the phone extractions. Phone extractions are going to be dependent upon having access to the phones. If the phones are gone, they're gone. The records are the records. There's no way to interfere with those. You can't erase the records. There's no ability on a subscriber's part to manipulate the records in any way whatsoever. So if someone was engaged in texting between parties, if there was some sort of scurrying going on because there was an injury in the house or an incident occurred, again, it works both ways. So the absence thereof, it works in the prosecution's favor. The presence of activity amongst those 10 folks in the home would indicate, first of all, that would have been great for cross-examination. If you, as the defense, to be able to say, hey, I see you two people were texting, or you were texting this person, or you were making these phone calls. Here's a 2-minute phone call with so-and-so. What was that conversation about? What were you texting about? I mean, these are all the same.
Well, this case has turned out to be a butt dial. They said they claim mutual butt dials, a double mutual butt dial.
Unfortunately, this is the most unfortunate part of this. I didn't start watching the trial or even paying attention to this case until after all the butt dialing testimony. So I have to say, yeah, that's an unfortunate situation for me, because I really would have loved to have heard about all these butt dials and how they played into it. Never heard of so many butt dials. Although I will admit, I have butt dialed 2 people today on accident, because sometimes the phone will go open and then it'll have all the stuff and I'll just be talking and I'll hit it. Then all of a sudden I'll go, oh, it's ringing. I didn't mean to call that person. I have since put it on favorites when I have the phone part open. I just keep it on the favorites and that's it. So word to the wise, if you want to avoid butt dials, keep it on your favorites. Then you only call your favorite people and they don't mind if you call them.
At 222.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
But the main thing about the records is it has the ability to very positively timestamp certain events. And so with the geolocation data, like the plow driver there, you could timestamp his presence in that area.
How about the Ford Edge? If you know which Ford Edge it is, are the records related to the car company? Would they have anything? Is there any way to specifically locate a car like a Ford Edge?
There's connected car technology. I don't know if Ford Edge has that sort of sophisticated connected car technology where you could actually download from the EDR, the event data recorder. It might have some data in it. But again, I don't know how much law enforcement did with regard to nearby ring cameras, nearby surveillance cameras of other
couldn't find them. Nobody in the neighborhood had a ring camera that was working, apparently. That's another problem in the case. All right,
that is just also such a weird thing. Maybe they just didn't replace their batteries. I don't know. I don't know about this. I don't know if I believe you, Rhonda Weaver. I've never butt dialed. I don't know. And yes, Lisa MM, I missed the butt dials for sure. I missed the my friend John calls me all the time. He pocket dials me, butt dials me all the time too. And he's like, I'm like, John, you called me. I did? Yes, you did. Oh, I didn't mean to. Sorry. Bye. It's kind of funny.
Stay where you are. This is why I invited them on. They know what they're talking about. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Trooper Michael Proctor Plus coming up next hour.
Fact of the matter is, you delivered that car to Canton PD to the Sallyport garage before a single piece of taillight material was ever found in this case. Trooper Proctor, is that correct?
Correct. It arrives at 5:31.
This is a big deal. for the defense. This is sort of the part of the foundation of their conspiracy and frame job is that Trooper Michael Proctor is the one who takes pieces of the taillight off of Karen Reed's car and then plants them at the scene.
This is what's so suspect, and this is the stuff that's really hard. It's very hard to ignore. His testimony is like, yeah, we took it to the Sally Port, and then we found the pieces of taillight. What? Again, and this comes back to a retrial, and now he's gone. He's been reassigned starting on this July 7th.
And the timing of this is significant, right? Because no one finds a piece of the taillight until Karen's car, after her car has been seized and brought back to the Sally Port at the Canton PD. So here's more of Trooper Michael Proctor's testimony. This is about what time it was seized, because
And you originally claimed that seizure took place at 5:30 p.m. Is that right?
Correct.
You signed numerous affidavits under oath, claiming that you did not seize Ms. Reed's vehicle until 5:30 p.m. on January 29, 2022, right?
Correct.
At the time that you seized Ms. Reed's vehicle, you were unaware that there was alarm.com surveillance footage of the area from which the car was seized, correct?
Correct.
The fact of the matter is, that was false. The car was not seized at 5:30, was it?
4:16 p.m.
Right.
I understand that everyone is confused in this trial, but he just caught him not telling the truth. How can you trust anyone's credibility? Well, I was lying then, but I'm not lying now. Okay.
An hour and change, an hour and 18 minutes, hour and 20 minutes earlier. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you ever seek to change or amend the error, the false statement about the time?
So,
or received it seized in any of those documents that you filed under oath?
When I incorrectly transcribed the times, it was on the first affidavit I'd written. And then as I continued to write other search warrants, I used that as a template. So I never caught it on the first one. And that's the reason those times are off on the other affidavit I wrote.
So the first one was false. And then every single one after that was false too.
It was just an incorrect transcription of time.
An incorrect transcription of the time.
Yes.
Call that, I don't know, a Scrivener's error?
Objection.
Okay. I mean, it's police work. It's police work. You're charging someone with second-degree murder, and you don't get the times right, and you just decide to go by, well, I'll just use the same document I was using. It was wrong on this one. I was wrong on this one. Okay. I would imagine there's a way to append or redact certain information so you can change it. Maybe, and it's a legal process of doing that, being like, hey, I'm sure people can get the times wrong, but the seriousness of charges that you're filing against Karen Reed, like, you would think you'd have your act together. And this is where I don't understand. And this is, again, the O'Keefe family is grieving. They were looking for answers, but they're barking up the wrong tree, in my opinion. Obviously, at least half the jury thought the same thing, or more than half, or a significant amount of members of the jury thought the same thing, that none of this makes any sense. And again, we all should be afforded the same protections, especially when charged with a crime that is this serious.
Ask it differently.
Sure. Was it a typo?
Yes.
It was a typo. So you got the 4 wrong, you got the 1 wrong, and you got the 6 wrong. And those turned into 5 and 3 and 0, right?
Total side note, but my father is right now trying to get released from prison for a typo as well, because the 4th of July holiday is tomorrow. Because apparently when his conviction paperwork was filed, it was supposed to be filed on July 4th in 1990, and it was filed on July 5th, even though July 4th was a holiday. but he's trying to use that as a technicality. I mean, he's been trying to do this for years, by the way, but this is something that just came out. He gave an interview recently and it came out. So it's not new that these things creep up, paperwork errors and things of that nature. But again, yeah, I don't even know what to say.
Do a typo, sir.
And every minute counts here, right? Every minute counts because it's got to get from Karen Reed's parents' house to the Canton Police Department. It's about 40 minutes. Could be a little less, could be a little more, depending on how quickly you're going. So there's a window of time when the car gets to the Sally Port that he has to, according to the defense, take the pieces of taillight, then bring it back to the scene of the crime and plant it while the CERT team, the emergency response team, is recovering this stuff. So the window is really small here. So let's bring back in our guests, Charles Middlestaff, Rick Grundy, Peter Elliott. So the piece of taillight's got to go from the Sally Port to the crime scene to be planted, right? And there's video of Proctor here at the Sally Port, and he's behind the car by the taillight. You don't know what he's doing. Charles, is the equation any different when it comes to figuring out if Proctor went back to the crime scene? If it's a police officer versus a regular civilian trying to track them, are there more records for the way police vehicles move? I'm trying to figure out why we didn't hear exactly where he went after he left the Sally Port.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly interesting and obviously highly significant. I don't know what kind of vehicle he traveled in. Whether he was in a did he drive that vehicle?
No, that was towed.
That was towed, right. So is he in a marked car? Does it have a dash cam? Does he have a body camera? Is he wearing a body camera? Is he with anybody wearing a body camera? Look, there's going to be, during that route of travel, there should be an enormous number of different cameras along the way. And particularly early on when he seizes that vehicle, those are the ones that I'd have the most interest in to see if there's any way to.
How about his cell phone?
Yes, I would agree. Thank you so much, Jam Cracker, for the super sticker. Oh, look at your avatar for Massachusetts. Hey, there you go. I have not seen this reenactment video that you're talking about. I do think it would be it's a little peculiar with the Raggedy Andy doll. It would be disturbing as well. That maybe a Chucky doll would be even worse. But yeah, I don't know. Very, very disturbing. And thank you, 50,000 subs we crossed over on the weekend. I'm very, very grateful to everyone who's here.
Oh,
you will all stay because you have to hear me do the Chipmunk song at Christmas, and I promise you that's a thing.
But his cell phone, tell us.
Absolutely, cell phone too. But I'm trying more specific.
It has freaked out every girlfriend I've ever dated in my life. Just so you know.
Way and particularly early on when he seizes that vehicle, those are the ones that I'd have the most interest in to see if there's any way to.
How about his cell phone? Would his cell phone tell us?
Absolutely, cell phone too. But I'm trying more specifically to determine whether when that vehicle was initially towed, whether that taillight was intact initially.
Oh, that's a big issue. There's pictures, and every picture is just not clear enough to figure out. Depending, it's like one of those tests. You look at it, you see what you want to see, and that's another divide in all this. Let me ask you, Rick Grundy, why wouldn't the prosecution just present some definitive evidence about where Trooper Proctor went after he left that Sally Port? Something beyond his own testimony.
Oh, that's a great point, John Damon. I never even thought about that. That's a fantastic point. Can you imagine being a juror and coming out of this thing and watching? I hope you watch my channel, watching YouTube or all this stuff, or going on TikTok, and because now you're just oy vey. Can you imagine catching up? Oh, that's a disturbing. That is such a disturbing point that you just made. I'm going to have to screenshot that. I might have to talk about that. That is absolutely disturbing. Can you imagine? It'd be like coming out of a coma.
So
what was that movie with While You Were Sleeping? While You Were Sleeping? Yeah, be like While You Were Sleeping.
Speculation on that would be that they don't have it, didn't develop it. Just to fill in some of the things that were just said, unlikely he's going to have a body cam, possibly a dash cam, but unlikely he's going to be in a unmarked car working out of the district attorney's office. But he's got his state police radio. He's got obviously at least one, if not two, cell phones. So my thought is that normally you have a state police officer and you feel that they've done a thorough and appropriate job, particularly those that are assigned to the district attorney's office, and that they have the credibility to present their actions through their own professional testimony.
By the way, Shawshank Redemption is filmed in my hometown of Mansfield, Ohio. which is also a super weird thing because there's the amount of guys that goes to prison who's innocent of killing his wife. If you've ever seen, I met somebody recently who has not seen the Shawshank Redemption, and I feel very bad for them. I'm like, how could you not have seen that movie? Well, I don't like crime movies. It's by Stephen. It's a short story Stephen King did. It's a fabulous movie. Top 5 of all time. Anyways, filmed in my small town of Mansfield, Ohio, not to be confused with Karen Reed's hometown of Mansfield, Massachusetts. I know there's a lot of weird parallels with this channel and this whole case. Yeah, and Mariko True, the concept of being off, but also probably rewarding too, right? I mean, I can't imagine being off of social media for 60 days. What would your perspective be like? You don't have all this toxic garbage flying at you all over. I don't know. Might be a well-deserved break for some.
Here's an area where I agree with you. They may well want to. They certainly do want to, in light of the actions that were taken recently. To go back and you got to find whether it's other people, whether it's chime cameras along the way, whatever it is that corroborates what Proctor says needs to be summoned for this second trial, because he's now in the position that I thought he should have been when he testified the first time. That is disgraced and removed.
And removed from his position. So Peter Ellikin, does the defense want to dig deeper to specifically prove where Proctor was? Not like, there were 2 people there, nobody knows who they were. There's a window of time here. He had time. It's only 5 minutes from the Sally Port to the crime scene. He could have gone there. He could have easily planted all this evidence. Do you, if you're Alan Jackson, David Yannetti, do you want to dig deeper? Do you want to hire Charles Middlestat to find out exactly where Trooper Proctor was for those 15, 20 minutes?
Absolutely. It would be so great to have absolute certainty and as opposed to what we were left with, just reasonable doubt that, yeah, well, he technically had the time to get there and nobody really saw and knew where he was going. That would be ideal to do it. I don't know if all that exists anymore. A lot of those sort of documentation.
So I wish I could just like plop this up on the screen, but it's not easy. But this is me that is the prison where they filmed Shawshank Redemption. And that is the chief investigator from the case that I was in. But that is the prison where they filmed Shawshank Redemption in my small town of Mansfield, Ohio. There is yours truly in the cell block just by himself. Just shows you kind of the size of it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyways, they do a Halloween event there every year, and it's pretty wild. They lock you in there, and it's like a haunted house and the whole thing. It's it's been a tourist attraction. I think it shut down in 1991, something like that. And then obviously they made the movie, and yeah. Anyways, Shawshank. They have a gift shop. Yeah, it's a whole tourist attraction now.
And the cameras and all that, they don't save it over that long a period of time. Hopefully, it would have been better if that was done sort of in the past. If anything exists there, that would be so great to really finally have a real smoking gun, an aha moment, as opposed to this, well, geez, they just didn't prove it beyond reasonable doubt, and he could have been there. So the defense did a good job of raising those questions. Yeah, it's a possibility.
But they're telling us she's innocent, so they can answer them. If the evidence exists, to me, this should be the goal of both sides, if they truly believe in their case, is to show this next jury where Trooper Proctor was for those 15, 20 minutes. Everyone's staying where they are. When we come back, we're going to talk about the house that was never searched. Could there be a search of the house now? Could you find any forensic evidence? My goodness, in some of the cold cases we cover, they go to houses after 3 different people have lived in there. Would any evidence be left behind?
Well, thank you so much, Sharon Corner, for subscribing to the lawyer. Now, Colleen, hold on, but you're exactly right. That's the real reason they weren't giving clarity. So, Colleen, hold on. Colleen, what did Colleen say? Where is Colleen at? I want to see what Colleen's comment was. Unless you meant to type Collier, then I'm super confused on what I said. That made a connection. I don't know. Did that make a connection? I don't know. They held the CERT team up until Proctor got back. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. That is interesting. And thank you so much for subscribing here, by the way. Yeah, the house was
Did an investigator or any forensics team ever come into your house?
This is in Albert, right?
To photograph your entire home?
No, I wish they had.
Did an investigator? Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too. The little... I did find it very funny during the trial, the little snide remarks that they would all sort of make. Lolly made them too. They'd have these little quips that they would make. It upset the judge. I thought that was kind of funny.
What a moment. Brian Albert, the owner of the home that was never searched. I mean, this, according to the defense, is the scene of the crime. Prosecutors obviously say nothing had anything to do with anything happening in the house. It all happened on the yard. It was basically a hit and run for the most part. So let's take a listen to more of the cross-examination of Brian Albert talking about what they didn't do and the status of the house.
Did an investigator or forensics team ever come into your house to search for physical evidence?
No.
Did an investigator or a forensics team ever come into your house to search for trace evidence?
No.
Did an investigator or forensics team ever come into your house to take carpet samples, flooring samples from the basement, for instance?
No.
And to this day, you're aware that that's never happened?
Yes.
By the way, the 34 Fairview house had been in your family at that time in 2022 for 2 generations?
My parents built the house in the late 70s, 79 maybe.
So if your parents are 1 generation, you and your family are another generation, 2 generations.
Right.
Nearly, maybe actually a little more than 50 years, half a century.
That what?
It was the Albert home.
Yes.
The fact is, you listed that house for sale for the first time ever in November of 2022, correct?
That's the time we listed it, yes.
Just months after John O'Keefe was found on your lawn.
Objection.
I mean,
all right. The defense theory is clear that they believe.
I'm a little. I know that that's a big deal. A lot of people think that that's a big smoking gun. I don't know if personally if I would have kept the house either. You know, I probably would have gotten rid of it myself. Whether or not I did anything nefarious in there, I'm not saying one way or another. I just personally would have gotten rid of the house if it had all this bad juju to begin with. So I'd just be like, I'm done with this place. There's too many red flags not to come back not guilty. Yes.
Believe some murder took place, a beating death of John O'Keefe down in the basement. The basement, according to the homeowners, had a water problem and they redid it before they sold it, the basement part. But Charles Middlestaff, this house has never been forensically searched. Would it be worthwhile for the defense to hire some expert, go through it and see if you can find anything?
Well, I'm going to get on my soapbox for 20 seconds here. So, you know, what we're talking about here is a lot of burden shifting. I mean, what the defense has done and what it should never have to do is, you know, it should be able to dispute the accuracy and the reliability of the state's evidence. And that's what it's done. And it resulted in a hung jury. Now, what we're talking about and what we've been talking about mostly is what can the defense do to prove its case, to prove its theory? And, you know, that is
to win. She wants to go free. She wants to go free.
I understand, but it is burden shifting. And the state has a problem. They have a disgraced cop who's been terminated. He's been impeached. And they're the ones that are have to explain this. But the fact of the matter is it's a botched investigation. There are some very odd circumstances surrounding the connectivity between all of the witnesses in this case and the occupants of that house and the lead investigator. And so it was incumbent upon the prosecution to foresee all of that and try to overcome all of that with some good evidence and some good explanations for all of those things. And they were either unable to do so or didn't think it was going to be important.
I think this gets us to another place, Peter Ellikin, and I'll just throw it to you. Do you think the defense is going to be happy with another hung jury? Does she want another 3 months? Does Alan Jackson want to move to Boston for another 3 months for another hung jury and then try the case again?
The last thing they want to do is go back to square one, go to the starting block and do an entire do-over of the thing all over again. Absolutely, they don't have. They would not want to do that.
Do you think they'll want to search the house?
They're having some sort of finale outside. I can hear it. Baby, you're a firework. Come on, let your colors burst. Yeah, fireworks outside. I can hear them going on.
Yes, but again, like I said, I'm a little pessimistic about that too. One of the things that really annoyed me in this case is when people would accuse the defense saying, "Oh, you guys are talking about he got beaten up in the house. Where's your evidence? Where's your proof? You got nothing." Of course, we don't have any. Of course, the defense.
There was no investigation.
Yeah, there was no investigation, and now that they've ripped up the floors and redid everything and all that, I don't know that anything is left there to get. And this is why I say that it's such an unfair thing that perhaps if you have forensic people in there, could they find a spot of blood somewhere?
I mean, in cold cases, sometimes they go in and they find something. If you found John O'Keefe's blood in that house, it's game over. Your client walks.
And if you don't, then it's counted against you. Now you've assumed a burden that you shouldn't have to, and if you can't make your case, then it actually works against you. And
I mean, that's so right? Again, as he's saying, like the shifting of the burden. I mean, very accurately. Todd McGee and I did my first video on this over a month ago. I think it was like, I don't know, May 23rd or something like that. I started talking about this. So almost a month and a half ago, 40 days ago, we talked about the same thing. Again, it's not their burden to prove that she's not guilty. They have no burden. It's the state's burden of proof, or the Commonwealth's burden of proof against Karen Reed. So again, it's a lot. Does this mean Chloe will get some screen time? Maybe. You never know.
And so I don't think they should lift her like that. I think they should work with what they have.
Okay. Let me show you something else here, Rick. Here's Nicole Albert talking about. Now, remember those wounds on the arm? One side saying it's the tail light that made all those cuts on John O'Keefe's arm. The defense very clear that it was Chloe the dog inside the home. Here's what we learned about Chloe the dog during the trial.
You testified that your German Shepherd, Chloe, was also at the house when you arrived home on January 29th, correct?
Yes.
She's a large German Shepherd.
Yep, about 70 pounds.
She's not great with strangers.
I wouldn't say that.
You wouldn't say that it's kind of a poorly worded question. Would you say that she's good with strangers?
I'd say she's fine with strangers.
Fine with strangers. Ms. Albert, Chloe has injured other humans, hasn't she?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that. In one incident in May of 22, when she got out and was fighting with another dog, the woman whose dog it was tried to break up the two dogs. And while she was trying to break up the two dogs, she got injured.
Ms. Albert, you don't have Chloe anymore, do you?
Nope.
That's interesting.
In May of 2022, 4 months after Mr. O'Keefe's death, you got rid of your family dog of 6 years.
Objection.
Oh, is that true? Is that when you got rid of your dog? I did not get rid of my dog. I rehomed my dog.
Your dog is no longer in the Canton area, correct?
No, but I know where she is. She's in Vermont.
Rick Rundy, should the prosecution go find Chloe? Maybe get an expert to take a look at Chloe's teeth and then take a look at John O'Keefe's arms and show this jury that this wasn't a dog bite?
So I think the next thing that she said was that, and I've provided the information as to where Chloe is and offered Chloe up for whatever testing. And I know that there was a testing of the wound for dog DNA. So again, I think they are, you want to be careful as a prosecution not to spend all of your time and put your focus on chasing down the defense's theory. We spoke the first night, Vinny, after openings and agreed upon that it was a very strong and effective defense opening statement. But that they may have pushed the envelope a little too far because they definitively said, we're going to prove to you that Karen Reed was set up. So Charles is right.
And I mean, there you go. Those are just weird.
He said the word framed. David said framed. David Rennie said she was framed.
Correct. So there was burden shifting, but it was voluntarily. So where the range were pulled in on closing the loop on some of these things, I think that the defense thoroughly went through Proctor's phone and tried to place him at places and was unable to, or certainly unable to in a method that would fill in their theory of the case. And, I can't do it. The prosecution can't do it, but I'm relying on the media people. The first thing, it's best to have a roadmap to know where you're going. And the first thing I want to know is those people who were on the not guilty side, was it not guilty because we find that the defense didn't come through with this whole frame-up thing, but the Commonwealth didn't prove their case. So I wanted, when I'm building this second case, that's the information that would be most helpful for me. If it comes back and they say, hey, look, we found this, these wounds, very troubling. Yeah. I got to do more there. Or tracking people, I got to do more there. But if it's because we have to leave it there, Rick. I always do this to Rick. It's always Rick. Rick gets it every time.
Oh, all right. Anyways, Mover Nation. There's a little weak little review. God, I need some light. I need some backlight here, guys. What am I doing? I'm a bad cinematographer tonight. I can see only half my side of my face. I should have turned the light on. Whatever. I didn't want to show how bad this hair, how curly this crazy hair is right now. Mover Nation. We got through the week. We got through the trial. And here we are. With the assessment, I know some people were not pleased with it ending in a mistrial. Some people were hoping for a guilty verdict. Some people were hoping for a not guilty verdict. We will see how this whole thing plays out because it doesn't look like there's any end in sight. And I can just imagine next week a lot more things coming out. And there's still a whole federal investigation that's happening. It's still a whole internal affairs situation with Trooper Proctor. There's a lot of stuff happening. And as I was talking to Melanie Little, who was so courteous and wonderful to come on earlier in the program, she messaged me. She said, hey, this whole thing is never going to end. And I have to say, I would agree. I don't see it coming to an end either. And that's a shame. And it's a shame that the O'Keefe family still has no justice. But again, as I said, for the longest time, sending an innocent woman to prison or innocent person to prison is not the answer. It's not how this country works. So, Mover Nation, as I also said, we can all take a hard and sobering look at this case. A lot of alcohol consumed that led to a lot of problems here. And tomorrow is one of the largest drinking holidays in the United States, July 4th. Please, I would encourage you to exercise caution, exercise moderation. If you're not, please do not get behind the wheel of a car. We had a member of Mover Nation last year who lost their life because someone decided to do that. And you know, Paige Matthews was her name. And just reflecting on that, please make a good decision. Please encourage your friends and family to do so as well. Stay safe out there. As I say, please enjoy the holiday, enjoy the fireworks. Baby, you're a firework. Come on, let your colors burst. Want to say, anyways, enjoy your 4th of July holiday. For those of you who are in Canada and celebrated Canada Day on Monday, happy belated Canada Day. And happy 4th of July. And look, we all have this luxury. As I said, we sit here, we talk on the YouTubes, we talk on the channels, the chats, the social media about this case, but we all have the luxury of going home to our families and our loved ones, and we don't have to deal with this because it's not a part of our life, and we should be grateful for that. So, Mover Nation, on that note, as I always say, please take care of one another, be kind to one another, and remember that we have that luxury to be here, and all of that stuff. So, I will see you all. Have a wonderful, happy, and safe 4th of July holiday. Here's the outro. Mover Nation, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to all my channel members and Patreon supporters. And for more exclusive content, behind the scenes videos, monthly VIP meet and greets, and watch parties, please consider supporting me on Patreon or by becoming a YouTube channel member. If you like this video, check out this one right here or this one right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps with the algorithm. On that note, I'm Collier Landry. I'll see you on the next one. Good girl, Marisol. Good girl.